Hello, and welcome everyone to the 58th official episode of Eunuch Corner Club Live. The title of the episode says it all. We're going to be talking about the majesty of myth, the fantastic quality of fiction to make all of our lives better and have meaning, and to carry the things that matter to all of us forward. So, Raging Mandrill's a wonderful guest, but we'll be getting him in just a second. First, I'd like to thank everybody who financially supports the channel. Well, if it will show, give me just a moment here. My slide didn't fire when I told it to. There it goes. All right. There it is. These fine people here, Iron Roots, White Healing, the Alabaster Bazek, Simon, JJ, and many others, they financially support me each month, and I'm deeply appreciative of them. I would greatly appreciate if you would do the same, even $1 a month if you like my content. It means a lot to me because it's difficult for me to find work here in the middle of nowhere, and all the dollars that I get doing this mean it's less time I have to spend doing odd jobs and finding work elsewhere. So if you like what I do, please consider supporting me monthly over on Subscribestar, and do so over on Entropy. You can support the fine people at Entropy who are ideologically aligned with us, and you can also put non-paid chats in the question widget over on Entropy. I will read those. We'll be checking them every 30 or 40 minutes or so. If you have things you want to ask me or my guest, put them in the question widget. That way they won't get buried in chat. You can also find Entropy as the pinned comment in the YouTube chat and over on the Odyssey chat. And speaking of Odyssey, if you want to give me money directly through Odyssey, I like Odyssey pretty good, and I wouldn't mind you supporting them to support me. You can give hyper chats over on Odyssey. With real dollars, and I would appreciate that as well. Hello to everyone who is on DLive. Hello to everyone on Odyssey, Entropy, and YouTube, because this is Eunuch Corner Club, so we are on YouTube still. So with that being said, we are going to introduce my wonderful guest. He is the one, the only, Raging Mandrill. Mandrill, welcome to the stream, my friend. You doing okay tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you guys? Can anyone hear me?
I hear you loud and clear, my friend, and I am doing just fine. I had a pretty relaxing day. I've been avoiding the heat. It's been bright, sunny, and terrible today, and I am glad to be indoors. So I have had a pretty chill day, and I've thought a lot about fiction lately. And a few days ago, I reached out to Raging Mandrill and asked him if he wanted to do a stream because I've met him before. He was at the Nashville Shieldings event that I went to. And in the chat from AA and other people's chat rooms, I've known him, and I know him from Prudentialist Telegram chat. And he always has interesting, intelligent things to say. And my brain remembers him speaking about fiction and Tolkien and BattleTech and things in the past. And I had him recently, what was it, 3 weeks ago, I think I had you on Discordant Dragons, something like that.
That's correct.
And I thought, why not do a stream with Raging Mandrill? Surely an intellectual guy like that has a lot of things that I find relatable to say would be a fun man to have a conversation with. So most of my viewers probably won't know who you are. So why don't you take a few minutes, tell them about yourself, tell them what led you to where you are now and why you're a content creator doing what you do among us dissidents. And while you do so, I'm going to put all of your relevant links in the chat for everybody.
Well, all right. Thanks for that. And well, I guess you could say it really all did literally start with game. I started watching Sargon of Akkad back in around 2015 days. You know, was a very normie kind of person, hung around in a lot of like those kind of chat rooms. You know, around the Brexit timeframe, found Academic Agent somehow. You know, as one does, you go into a rabbit hole when, you know, you just binge content and eventually find someone that you like. And yeah, here I am. And so basically what I do is I hang out on Twitter. I comment on their threads a lot. My job affords me the time to do stuff like that. And for the stuff that I actually make, I have written a couple Substack articles, poetry. I think I did submit for Antelope Hill's writing competition last year. I'm not sure if I will submit this year. And yeah, I make some YouTube videos on various esoteric topics in the dissident right. So that is who I am.
And I'm glad to have met you this year. When it comes to the things that I want to talk about with you today, obviously, you have chosen an icon that I know, but I don't know if most of my viewers will. Would you like to take a moment and tell people why you chose this particular name and this icon to go as your public image here?
Sure. So my icon is actually a specific faction from the 1980s classic battle tabletop war game. And essentially, if those who don't know BattleTech, there's two basic cultural blocks in BattleTech that you could describe, right? You have the inner sphere, and then you also have this thing called the clans. And this is obviously a clan called Clan Fire, Mandrill, hence the name Mandrill. And the raging part of it comes from my BattleTech tabletop buddy and I, who is actually a really good and is also into our sort of distant academic agent listing sphere, although he doesn't comment or post anything.
Oh, okay, cool.
But basically, the rage comes from the fact that the Mandrill is a long range missile user. He's a sniper, basically, and we read him in Sarna, or not Sarna, excuse me, Solaris Works, which is the, I guess, software program that you can use to redesign your Stompy robots, and that is a battle mech. And we basically took out the long-range missiles, put in the short-range missiles, and made him super speedy, hence why he's the Raging Mandrill.
I'm getting open the picture that you sent me in Twitter, so so we can see.
Oh, perfect.
There it goes. Here we go. All right, let me pop that open. There we go. There it is. All right. Oh, wait, it didn't show up. Oh, there. Oh, I had to click it again over on the thing. There it is. Very nice.
There we go.
Very nice.
There he is.
I love it. Well, speaking of BattleTech, why don't you? BattleTech is something near and dear to my heart too. I love BattleTech. I've loved it since the '80s. I think the first box set I got was in '89, and I've been playing it and reading it and loving it for many years. The thing that I like a lot about BattleTech is they've done a great job of showing the endless struggle and the dynamic nature of the human spirit over many, many centuries. Of every faction, every religion, every language, every group, it has its heroes and it has its villains. And it's done a good job of showing that the heroic spirit of man is never ceasing. Despite the worst of troubles, the worst of war, there are always aristocrats. There are always leaders trying to be the next Alexander the Great. There are always men that are covetous and evil and sniveling, trying to ride the coattails of the great men. And then, of course, all of the different detritus that is the fallout of all of those things. Is there any particular event or story of legend from BattleTech that you want that stands out in your mind that you'd like to share with us today?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm using a Fire Mandrill clan, so I'm obviously a clanner initially. That's my initial chosen faction.
Mine too.
I guess you could say, oh, okay, you like the clan cheese.
Yes, I'm a clanner. Yeah. Yes, but also remember, I am a warrior spirit, and I would have been one of the loyalists that left with Kerensky. So that's I sort of self-project into BattleTech there a little bit, but no, I would have been a loyalist, and technically not a loyalist. I would have been a splitter from the SLDF that was loyal to Kerensky and would have left with him. But regardless, I'm getting away from things. Go ahead.
Loyal to true principles, definitely. So the clans are unique, right? So in the inner sphere, you basically have every single political faction represented, right? You have all of these different factions that are like either capitalist or they're just openly communist. You have your various monarchical houses, et cetera, right? Everybody's there. The clans are different. They have an entirely different structure to the way that they operate, right? They're not like normal human society at all.
Right.
So yes, there is the sort of like genetically engineered, they have specific bloodlines that they mix together for warriors who, and they have a literal warrior caste for which they do this. There are several different observations that I think you could their society, which is actually beneficial, right? They have this sense of warrior ethos, and honor is like central to everything. And in fact, their actual system of participating in armed conflict actually has this weird tendency, because of the honor thing as a value, to devolve down into the lowest common possible level of conflict, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Basically, this is called, it's the clan challenging system.
It's the
I
engagement
forget
of Bachal. That's what they call it, right? The engagement, the rules of Bachal, I think is what they call it.
Yeah, something like that. My terminology isn't so good. I'm not up to lore as I should be. But
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
basically,
I read the books all the time, and I play the video games sometimes. So I'm pretty steeped in the terminology and the icons.
Right. So it's essentially, what this does, right, is it actually reduces the scale and the ferocity of conflict, right? Because if you can individually challenge another warrior, usually over some piece of battlefield loot or something like that, right? But this also is applied at like the fleet level or the army level, right? So when you have a challenge that is given, right? Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm in a public area.
Oh,
Anyway,
that's okay.
so like I was saying, you um, you have the this challenge system where basically the honorable thing is to commit the least amount of forces, right? So it had their actual like culture has this weird tendency where actually it reduces like the scale and ferocity of conflict.
Right, because they view collateral damage, carpet bombing, assassinations. They view that as extremely dishonorable, and no one wants to ever be responsible or engage with that kind of thing. It's a very it's noble and beautiful in a way, because if there's a conflict and two factions in the clan territories, like let's say two factions want to control a moon because it has good resources or it's a good jump point to get to an ice belt, then instead of just them going to war and blowing the shit out of each other with ships and machines, they will make a proper challenge. And they'll say, I'm willing to contribute 50 of this machine and 2 warships and this many men. And the other one says, well, I don't want you to have it, but I will be willing to fight you with only 1 warship and this many men. And then they sort of bid each other down until they get down to the smallest possible conflict that each one agrees to put men towards. So you end up just having basically honor battles between small numbers of things, and they view that as a much more honorable and noble way to settle conflicts when it has to come to blood. And I think it's a very noble thing. I like that.
Right, and it's definitely on the other side of it as well. It takes away the idea of the mass and scale of conflict, right? There is no mass conscription in clan society. In fact, like I was saying, because you actually have a physical warrior caste, right, who is obviously the ruling class in clan society, but they also have, like, the merchant caste, et cetera, right? So it's not that, like, it's an actual truly caste hierarchical system in that regard, right? But if you're somebody from the merchant caste, you're not going to be fighting honor duels on the battlefield. That's not your job. Like, you're not expected to do that. If you're somebody who's a bondsman, right, you're not expected to do anything else, right? Or if you're a laborer. So there's a very clear hierarchical system that's because at least it seems to work. At least in a vacuum, if once they encounter the inner sphere, all that clan nonsense tends to get
But one of the reasons I brought up BattleTech early in the stream is not only am I passionate about it, but it's a good jumping off point for the topic of tonight, which is talking about the value of mythology and the majesty. I chose that word because I like alliteration, majesty and myth. But majesty can mean a lot of things. Majestic, a king, or just the feeling of being in awe at something greater than yourself. And I think that is the power of our fiction. Because when you look at the men who are inspired by things, they're inspired by tales, whether true or not, of greater men that came before them in history, even if they weren't of their own people. People will be inspired of legends of men from around the world, and they're still inspired by those tales and that myth today. And that's why I think fiction is so important, because if you do fiction correctly, this is why I don't think that you have to have purposefully slanted right-wing fiction to be right wing. It just has to be true and good, because that is right wing, that is dissident, that is truth, that is natural, that is within the great order of things, is to tell tales of great legendary acts of men and women that have created all of the building blocks that came before you and where you are now. And I think that when it comes to BattleTech, you have such a beautiful expression of not just human suffering and human folly, but of human sacrifice and human greatness and people of legend, people that have done great and impressive things, and the warriors of today, 300, 400, 500 years into this endless war, there are still great men of legend that these warriors try to emulate and fight like, and work in the shadow of. And I think that that's just that. In my opinion, that's good fiction. That's good mythology. So, with the things that I just shared about why I think mythology is important, does anything in particular come to mind, or something you want to talk about along that theme?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you really about it, right, all good fiction, whether it's science fiction or whether it's high fantasy, all of those things have some very reactionary themes and very like reactionary settings in a way. So you could almost describe like good stories that are much more traditional.
Yeah, I see that.
I think
Go
that
on.
gives us a good jumping off point actually to
Hmm.
to Dune, and I actually am working on a video script right now of my analysis of Dune. I have a symbological analysis based on pagan symbology of the new 2021 movie, and I got sidetracked on it really because I had never read the book. Right, I've seen the 1980s movie, I saw the 2021 movie, but I'd never actually gone and read the book series. But I had to go recently reread the book. After we all went to the event because I felt it needed the due diligence to do that. So once I actually get the time again, I'll start typing away on that project. So
That's wonderful. I love Dune, the old the 1984, 85, whenever that movie came out in the 80s. I love the long extended version of it. My husband and I watch it once a year. Uh, I have trouble reading novels. I have ADHD. I don't take medicine for, so it's very difficult for me to read thick, dense things. So I haven't read hardly any novels, but I do love the story. And I've had my husband, who is an avid reader and writer, he has told me that the story of all the Frank Herbert novels. So I definitely appreciate and have basic working knowledge of what goes on in the novels, even though I haven't read them myself. And I too think it's wonderfully done fiction. I think it's a great narrative, a great story. I'll be looking forward to whenever you get that video done. I'm sure that's going to take a lot of work on your end.
oh yes, I have more projects that I have time for.
I hear you. I hear you.
and
I like
and
we were saying
specifically,
before we started. I wish I had 10 of me to get done all the things I want to do.
yeah, and specifically, I have more ideas for projects than I have time for. So you know,
Yeah, yeah. So, uh, since we pivoted to Dune, uh, what particular about the Dune fiction really speaks to you? Speaks to your spirit? Speaks to your mind? What do you love about it most?
hmm, I think the one thing that as more, I'm still relatively young, but like in my youth, I don't think I was ready for it just because I did of the new atheist, angry atheist phase
We all
when I
did.
was a
We all did.
teenager in my early 20s. Yeah, I know. But I don't think I would have been ready for the, I guess, positive depiction of Rune. Would have probably thought it was hokey or dumb or something. Um, but it actually has a very interesting role, and um, this sort of like reading it, I almost felt like the spirituality dripped from every page. So it's a very like overtly spiritual storyline. It's impossible to have it without it.
I'm listening. Or were you
Yeah.
done?
Anyway, I don't.
Oh,
I
sorry.
was done actually. I mean, I could
Oh,
digress longer if you want, but I mean,
oh no,
I mean,
that's
I could
that's the
just stop.
purpose of the stream is to listen to you and have you speak your mind about these topics. I love it. Like that. The whole nature of Unit Corner Club is basically the reason I called it Corner Club is it's like people just sitting at a lounge or or like that's probably might even be why AA called his cigar stream the cigar stream. Is this is supposed to be a like you're a featured speaker at my little private club and people are getting to listen in. So I like hearing whatever it is you have to say and for you to go on at length about things that you're passionate about or interested in.
Okay, I did notice you posted a comment here, and I will briefly comment. So
Sure.
the 21 film, as far as I'm concerned, yes, it does have the modern diversity. It's not 1980s diversity like BattleTech or anything,
Right.
but it's still
they
a
had
very
to put
good
that strong
story.
women of color in there, didn't they?
Yeah. I kind of got I mean, yes, reading the book, I kind of got annoyed by that because it was like they also did a gender swap with that as well, right? And you can kind of, if you notice very carefully in that film, right, there's a scene where I think Duke Leto and everybody's cabinet is all hanging out at the where the spice.
You're talking about the elite lounge at the refinery. Is that what you're talking about?
Not the elite lounge, but yes, they are at the refinery. They're in front of the refinery tanks.
Oh yes,
yeah,
that
that's
one.
tanks.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a part in there where they're in front of the tanks, and I don't know if this was a mistake, but they refer to the character where they did a gender swap. I always forget this dude's name, right? But they mentioned it as a he, right? And obviously it's a she and cast as a she, right? So I found that very interesting that that was there, whether that was done intentionally or whether that was a mistake or whether they just left that part in because they thought no one would notice. But yeah, I found that fascinating. On that topic, right, in terms of the anti-whiteism, is if you notice very carefully, and I did put a sprinkle of that noticing in my poem from the event, which was also heavily Dune influenced. It's there's a if you notice in the new movie, right, Paul actually has to overcome his mother, and then he has to overcome Yamas, right? This character who's a very almost primal tribal figure who's obviously cast by a person of color, right? So it's interesting because like just the symbolism of that is still like, oh, it's okay, YTE, you can kind of like overcome women and overcome the the black guy and still become the hero and win. So I thought that was interesting, and I'm surprised
I also
that
found that surprising. I thought for sure that he was going to end up dead or weak, or they were going to try to Deus Ex Machina her in at the end somehow. But no, they didn't do that, and I was surprised. I was like, hey, that's surprisingly not shitty.
Yeah. I mean, also, even in the 2021 movie, right? Like, it's still very positive, like religious depictions, right? And actually, this is why I wanted to do my pagan symbolism video on it, is because there is a lot of it, right? It's if you didn't know what you're looking for, it might be confusing, but yes, there is quite a bit of it in there in terms of like actual pagan symbolism. So I thought the 2021 iteration was very good, despite the obvious modern Hollywood insertions.
Yeah, I wasn't going to watch it at all, but my husband screened it, and he was like, hey, yes, this is pretty good. You should watch some of this. So I watched some of it with him, but I didn't want to sit and watch the whole thing because I made myself a promise that I wasn't going to watch any new movies or anything new just because I just don't want to waste my time doing that. I got more important stuff to do. But he showed me a few scenes of it, and it was surprisingly not shitty. I was surprised. But
it's very artistically done. I like the colors in it a lot because it's got a very simplistic color palette and very simple contrasts, right? And every scene is like this. Every scene looks like it could have come from a side, like some sort of like really old school sci-fi, or like literally out of a video game, like a modern video game. And a lot of them actually bear like resemblances to some Warhammer paintings, etc. And there's also a little bit of I guess you would say fashy elements to it, with the obvious black clad Atreides soldiers standing in ranks and all that stuff, which I think is kind of funny that was in there. When I saw that, it was like, oh really?
Yeah.
and it made me chuckle to myself.
Yeah,
but,
and I don't know. It, like I said, I haven't seen the whole movie beginning to end, but that from what I saw, the Atreides, or however it's pronounced, that fasci element, yes, they're kind of the bad guys, but at the same time, it wasn't like, look at all of these organized white men, aren't they just laughably evil? I didn't get that vibe either. So at least it wasn't like blatant SJW anti-whiteism. The anti-white, anti-Western elements were subtle, at least.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's intentional. I mean, there is something on the flip side of that to be worried about, right? Which is, like, which kind of is what academic agent thinks right now, is that they're kind of like slowly telling us that it's okay, and they're going to tone it down a little bit with a nonce and try to bring people back into the fold. So I think if that's something to be forewarned about, you should be. So.
Yeah, somebody in the chat brought up the Sci-Fi Dune series. I watched some of that, but I've forgotten all of it. Did you watch the Sci-Fi series years ago? Did you, or have you seen it recently?
No, I can't say that I have seen it.
I don't remember enough about it to speak on it, so we'll just leave that alone. Back to the topic of mythology and the importance of it and the majesty of it. When I find myself thinking about stories I've read, or when I sit down and read a gaming book or a BattleTech book, or I look through Sarna or websites about some great fiction, like reading about Tolkien again, reading about some of the Forgotten Realms stuff that I love, when I sit down and delve mentally and spiritually into mythology, I find myself sort of feeling like I'm sitting at the feet of old gods or sitting on the shoulder of giants. And it inspires me in ways that nothing else does, that I don't get, let's say, like when I read the Bible, or when I pray, or when I talk to people at my mother's church about Christian stuff. Do you feel the same way? Because I know that you said you had your new atheist phase and all of that too. Do you feel more inspired by mythology and non-religious fiction than you do actual religion?
5 years ago, I would have said yes. I'm not sure if I will now. And well, I guess you could say that my conversion to, or my coming to a more humanistic style of thinking is, I mean, those sort of elements, and I kind of tried to say this during my stream with Academic Agent. All of those symbols, all of those themes and things are present in a lot of high fantasy, and they're folkloric elements, right? They have never truly been extinguished or gone away, and they keep popping up over and over again. And I've done quite a bit of research on a lot of some more of the pagan religions, especially the Norse one in particular, and they don't. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, well, actually, it's kind of like you're coming back and meeting an old friend that you've never met before, if that makes sense, right? I had a very similar feeling. Yeah, I had a very similar feeling to that, meeting people at the event. Actually, it was very odd, right? And that's kind of what gave me the inspiration for my post-event poem, actually.
I haven't finished it all, but I flipped through and read a few lines here and there in the Young Edda. I've got 3 of the Asatru books, and is Asatru something that you've been exploring?
Yes, although I mean, I'm not in an area there's like an actual Asatru temple to go to, so it's been very difficult in that regard. And
well, I just been exploring the
pagan
ideas. I don't have anyone here to show me anything or to practice, but just flipping through and reading a few words here and there, and looking at a few sentences and some of the I guess you could call it epic like prose of the what's in the Young Edda. It was very inspiring, and you said it was like meeting an old friend that you didn't know, and I could relate to that because it sort of spoke to me in a way that flipping through the Bible and reading Bible verses doesn't. And I found that very interesting because I didn't grow up with anything besides Christianity. I haven't had any religion in my life besides that. But something about the nature and the kinship with the Asatru books that I flipped through and with the Asatru people I talk to online, I feel this kind of weird like preternatural kinship and inspiration there that I don't get from church and that I don't get from the Bible.
It's different, yeah. There's a sense of grandiosity that is like almost required by that style of pagan thinking. Um, and the reason for that is because ultimately it depends on how you come to find the transcendent, right? The Christians obviously find it through the word, right? Whereas the pagans find it through the image and the deed. And so if you can just imagine, it doesn't need a message. The art doesn't need a particular like message to be grand or to be inspiring, right? Think of like in Lord of the Rings. Think like when you see those two figures on the river, those two stone statues in the Fellowship of the Ring, right at the end of the movie when they're all on those little elven do things, and they just look up, and all of a sudden it's these two massive, ancient, Numenorian style statues, right? That's the kind of thing that we seek and that we need, right? And it's a similar thing, right? There needs to be like there's specific I think it comes from the Volsunga saga, if I remember correctly. But there's a story where one of the Volsungs, he has to ride through a wall of fire in order to go, acquire a Valkyrie who's been promised as his wife, basically. And that's an interesting little vignette. And to describe it is in the way that I'm doing so now kind of cheapens it in a way, because it doesn't give you how grand it is, how wondrous it is. And there's I guess a lot of stuff about fire and shininess and things like that in the old sagas. I find it fascinating, just because in that way there's a lot of things that are taken as more sacred and more poignant, if you will.
There's a. Did you take a copy of the Go Free book by Jason I brought to the Shieldings event? Did you get one of those?
Actually, I didn't get any books at the Shieldings event other than the Charlemagne gave to me.
Were they all gone when you got there?
Oh yeah, they were gone. They were gone in 30
Yeah.
seconds flat, man.
But
I was actually kind of mad because I actually had purchased the book presented at the event before I went to the event.
Oh.
So I was like, but it all worked out because I still got them. So I just had to buy them. But anyway.
The reason I brought it up is Jason wrote a book called Prometheus Rising, and it's science fiction. Well, I guess it's fantasy too, but it's about. Well, I think you would like it, and it's a good read. And since you like this kind of inspiring mythology fiction, I think you should definitely check that out. You would probably get more from that than you would even Go Free, I think, because Go Free is just more of like a workbook and of tactics and stuff, sort of like a mix of a lab journal or workbook in school mixed with like a self-help mental exercise guide. But Prometheus Rising is an actual story, and I think you'd like it a lot. I think you get a lot out of it.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because I mean I've always been a very pragmatic person, so like that sort of tactics discussion or logistical of okay, here's what you need to do in order to do this, and then you have to do that sort of stuff is why I got into tabletop wargaming and video game stuff. In
well,
then
you probably
place,
really
right?
like Go Free as well, then, because it's very much sort of like the rules book. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm kind of alternating my time between theoretical discussions and tactical discussions and actually that sort of more spiritual content, right? Like for example, I'm 2/3 of the way through Hoppe's Democracy: The God That Failed, and then I'm like 50 something pages into a book about the Indo-Europeans and their Genesis as a people. So literally,
Cool.
I guess you quote unquote, Chad Aryan conqueror people.
Yeah,
And I
the
find
real
that sort of
Aryans.
yeah, exactly. That sort of discussion fascinates me, right? Because you know, there's some mythology and stuff. It's the title of the book is the horse, the wheel, and the language, and I think it should be called the horse, the wheel, the language, and the faith, because
Mm.
the mythology or the mythology, right? Because the mythology is an ancient one, and there are myths that are very similar to ones that you've probably heard in Norse mythology or Greek mythology. There's two ones in specific about the creation of the world, and then there's another one about two brothers going to rescue a cow, and those myths are definitely present in the Norse mythos, and I think they're probably also present in the Greco-Roman one as well. The characters and the name and maybe some of the details change, but they are the same. So yeah, there's a thread of tradition that comes to these sorts of tales, and why I think that all of these tales are inherently reactionary if they're good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I hate to beat the Tolkien horse to death, but it's Tolkien is one of the things that really inspired me when I was young, and I didn't know until I was older. It was because I was a dissident, and I was not buying what the world was trying to sell me, and I really deeply appreciate the upbringing that I had, because where I grew up in this mountain holler, it might as well have been 1920 here. Like, things are still backwards here, and it's in the 2020s, but I grew up with the Bible. I grew up with old timey fiction. I grew up with Tolkien. I grew up with watching Wizard of Oz and Dolly, and going to Dollywood and meeting Dolly Parton. And my dad was big into prog rock and classic rock, and so I was very inspired by that kind of 60s and 70s psychedelic fiction, that kind of stuff. And thankfully, that gave me enough like genuine, real dissident mythology, even though it didn't codify it that way at the time. It gave me a lot of what religion couldn't give me. And when I say couldn't, it's not that I rejected religion outright when I was young. It's just I didn't truck with it, and something in my brain just can't feel the faith part of Christianity. I walk the walk, I talk the talk, I read the Bible, I pray, but on the inside, I just don't have faith. I can't have faith in anything. I've just never been able to. And thankfully, the mythology was there to give me what I needed that religion didn't. And I think that's one of the reasons that I turned out as well as I did after my unpleasant 20s, is because I had that underpinning of dissident mythology, and it means a lot to me. And I just wondered if I know that you're a much younger person. You're still a young man. You're in your young 20s, right?
No, I'm in my early 30s.
Oh, you are in your early 30s. Oh, well, you look good for your age. I thought you were like 24. Okay. Well, that's great. But
Yeah,
since you
I've
are
always been
older,
told that I look young.
well, since you are older than I thought, since you are, you've got a decade or more of proper adulthood under your belt. Do you feel similarly? Because I know that you had a stint of new atheism when you were younger, like I did. Did you get a lot of this good mythology when you were like, between 8 and 18? Did you get exposed to good mythology? And do you feel like that
Oh,
helped lift you up and bring you back to a more correct state of being because of that?
oh, absolutely. And I mean, like, it sounds cheesy, right? But the wargaming, I mean, Warhammer 40K was a massive influence on my teenage years.
Me too. Me too.
So yeah, and ultimately that's pretty kind of how I got into Sargon's crowd in the first place, because Sargon's whole major shtick is Warhammer 40K. So there you go.
Yep. I'm Team Space Wolves, by the way. If you're curious,
Oh, I was a
if I
guard player.
if I had to pick, oh, no, I just meant Space Marine chapters. They're not my favorite army to play in the game, but like when it just comes to the fluff and the lore, if I have to pick a chapter, I love Space Marines. Close second is Salamanders. I love Salamanders a lot too.
Mm. See, I used to like them so much, but I think the most interesting storyline is probably Lorgar's and the Word Bearers. I think
Yeah,
their story arc
yeah.
is incredible in terms of, and I think it does It's odd, right? There is some valence of wanting to find the truth, because that's basically what Lorgar says, right? All I ever wanted was the truth. And
Yep.
well, what happened? Considering how we are technically modern heretics, I don't know whether we should consider Lorgar the bad guy still, or whether we should,
Yeah, it's difficult. It's
it's
difficult, but
hard. Yeah.
aesthetically, I think aesthetically though, my heart lies with the Sisters of Battle. I don't find all of their
Mm.
lore agreeable, but I do. I hear a loud noise. What is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in a public space and there's music in the background.
Oh, it's
Myself
gone
when I'm
now.
not
It's fine.
talking.
Oh, it's fine. No, it's gone now. But aesthetically, though, with the Sisters of Battle, I've always felt kinship with them because being of the reject male or eunuch cluster, I've always liked the working in service to greater men that I could never be type of sentiment, and I really love the beautiful Catholic space fascism aesthetic to their whole armor and all of their accoutrement that they wear and their vehicles and stuff. I've just always
Oh,
loved the sister battle aesthetic.
that color scheme, the red, white, and black color scheme that they got going on is just awesome. It's
It
it's
is
so cool.
crisp. Yeah, it is quite nice. And that stuff, like aesthetics, is important too, because aesthetics alone can be inspiring, like artwork, sculpture, that kind of thing. That stuff, in my opinion, is tertiary to all the stuff that we're talking about. But because it's not really fiction, but it can also be mythologically inspiring as well. But let's not go off in the whole aesthetics art rabbit hole. That one's a deep one. But moving things back
Hmm.
to just 40K in general. In general, I like the mythology of 40K because they have the god figure of the Emperor of Man. They have the endless evil of entropy, chaos, and hedonism, which is of course represented by the forces in the warp. And then you've got everything in between, which is all of the horrible trials, tribulations, and enemies that mankind has to overcome. And to me, that endless struggle, even the tagline in the grim dark of the future, there is naught but war. Like the feeling of that sentiment rings true in my warrior spirit, that if a man no longer has anything to fight, then he's no longer a man and might as well die. And I feel like that there's a lot of truth in that fiction.
Hmm. Yeah, I commented on Semiagog and Turnip's Twitter thread, I think earlier today or last night, because they were talking about identity and how, like, they're coming to the conclusion that identity is always constructed. I'm like, well, yes, identity is constructed, but it's always constructed based upon having something that you are not, right? It's always by comparison of the other, and basically that's where the conflict arises, and where you have a sort of distinction and a difference, right? um, so that's, I mean, and from the identitarian perspective, you could even say, like, having the ability to compare yourself to somebody who's different from you very many ways. You can kind of, like, okay, you are different and I know that you're different, and that's enough for me to say that we're obviously different in such and such ways. um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's kind of like a very generalist take, but I mean, that's kind of where my sensibilities lie, right? You do need an enemy in order to, like, kind of know who you are in a way.
Yeah, you can. I forget who said this, but there's a famous quote from a dead author, I think, of "You can know a man by his enemies" or something like that. Like I read that long ago, and it stuck with me. You can know someone by their enemies, and I think that sort of relates to what you said there. And going back to just the necessity of mythology and why it's good, I think that this the spirit that we have, we strive to explore, to conquer, to fight, and to prove ourselves. And I think that the uh, maybe Yaki or Paul Fahrenheit might say it's the Aryan spirit, but just the spirit that is within us, within Western civilization, I think is one that has always wanted to reach for the stars. And I don't think you see that as a prevalent main theme in other great civilizations. And that could
Hmm.
just be my bigotry speaking, but one of the things that I really like about 40K is mankind, the emperor of man, literally wants to reach out to all of the stars of the Milky Way and explore, conquer, control, and prove himself and test his mettle as far as light goes, as far as the stars go. And I think that that's a very beautiful, inspiring sentiment. What do you think about that?
It's good, right? And I'll just say like the book that I'm reading right now about the ancient Yamnaya, or Proto-Indo-European people. Those people created the chariot supposedly, and why is the spaceship so fascinating for all of us in going into space? Why does this idea, seem to have such a grasp on the mind? Well, the answer is because the spaceship is our new chariot. Basically, it's the most modern version of it. So yes, I think that eventually imagination will inspire, and imagination has a tendency to pull us in a direction that we want to go, and that direction is towards the heavens, basically.
Speaking of reaching the heavens, is there any particular religious work? And I don't want to be rude and call religion fiction, but is there any sort of story or mythology or particular tale within a religious book or even in the Christian framework that you find personally inspiring to you in your life?
Let me see. I'd probably have to say there's one in the Eddas. It's one where it's about shoot, I'm forgetting the details. It's about how Thor and Loki and they have like a called Thialfi, who goes into the land of the giants, right? And they're trying to recover some item, and they have to perform tests and feats of strength against the giants, right? But of course, the giants aren't honest, and so they kind of trick the. And so Thor is like, he's trying to, you know, lift up some heavy object or something, or lift up this old, or arm wrestle this old woman, basically, right? And he's all upset because, oh, didn't, I wasn't successful. I wasn't able to overcome this obviously, weak and feeble old woman. And then he goes and he's instructed to get into a drinking contest, and he drinks this ale out of an ale horn, and he gets all sad because, oh, well, the ale horn keeps refilling. He's not able to drain it, right? Which is obviously, if you're a Chad, you're not want to be able to, chug it all in one go, right?
You got to chug that down and prove you're a man. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and he isn't able to do it. Loki gets himself into an eating contest, right? And this little minion called Thialfi gets into like a foot race, right? And each of them basically fails their test, right? And they're all sad, and they don't know what's happened. They have to like go back in shame to Asgard, basically. And this giant who's like the leader of the giants, right? Like later, once the coast clear and there's no risk to admits to them, hey, we kind of rigged the game, right? This old woman that you failed in your test of strength is actually time. So you literally succumbed to time itself. The mead horn, which Thor tried to drain, was actually connected to the ocean, and he has to look, and he sees, well, actually you were causing the up by your drinking. And of course, the Loki and the minion Thialfi like have their own tests that they actually succeeded, or that the game was rigged in some way, right? So I think Loki's was he was competing against fire. So
okay.
And fire consumes all, right? So that's a particularly interesting myth to me, because the moral of the story is even if it doesn't on the surface appear that you are actually successful, right? See that you're actually making progress, or you're more momentum, or you're actually doing something that's really good. That you're not as bad as you think you are, right?
Yeah.
So that's something
And
that
if to
in
you they're
particular stands
failures,
out to me.
they still could be great successes that inspire lesser men to be greater.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, you said that was in the New Edda.
Yeah, it's in. I think it's one of the Eddas. It's one of the stories about the gods.
Well, I've got the Young Edda and the New
Let's see.
Edda, so I'll have a look for that particular
Mhm.
story.
Yeah, I don't actually have the Eddas. I read Padraig Colum's The Book of Northern Myths, and so that's my source for that, which is kind of basically the same thing. But he also combines in the some of the Usunga saga as well. So
The last thing I wanted to talk with you about tonight was religion itself. You don't have to tell me any particular details about your personal life, but um, when it comes to religion and how you view what that topic is it the same thing to you as mythology? Because the more I study literature and the more I study the human condition and the older I get, it feels like that religion is sort of like the science that emerged from mythology thousands of years ago. And to me, I want to be inspired and moved by the stories in the Bible or by other religious things, but they feel too. And it's funny to say this, but they feel too real to me to feel like myth, to be inspiring like mythology. And I wondered if you had similar experiences um, through your long life of intellectual pursuits and loving the kinds of fiction that I do. Do here at the end of the stream to sort of tie this up, do you feel like religion in your life, whether it be Christianity or Asatru or any of these other things, do you feel like they are in the same category of spiritual inspiration and the majesty of myth as fictional mythology? Do you feel like they're the same kind of inspiration, or do you feel like they're different? And if so, why?
hmm, interesting question. Um, hmm.
Because I ponder this a lot on my own, because one of the things that's always plagued me is I want to be a good person. I want to live in the way that my people do. I want to be a part of Appalachia. I want to be a part of my kinfolk here. And they're all just so devoutly, just passionately Christian. And I never have been able to be. But but the things that inspire me, like they seem to be inspired by religion, I find in a Rush album. I find in BattleTech. I find in the new Edda or the young Edda. I find in Tolkien. Those are the things that inspire me and make me feel emboldened and connected and bigger than life and complete in the way that I see the people around me here in Appalachia complete by their old timey Southern Christianity. And I just, and because they seem to get out of that what I get out of these things. And I wondered if you have observed that same phenomenon and how that made you feel now that you're, you know, back into sort of a more religious spiritual mindset now that you're older and came back to the more dissident way.
Okay, so on reflection, I'm going to say that the mythology is the foundation for the religion, right? And it, I mean, personally, yes. If I may speak to you
Sure,
personally on this, I would
please.
recommend that if what you find as transcendent is I guess the image and the deed, then you're probably more along my lines than your fellow Appalachian Christian folk. That's just my personal
That is what
recommendation there.
inspires me is whether it be a single man or a group of men. I tend to be more inspired and feel more connected to the myth and the fiction of people accomplishing great things, overcoming great evils, besting great challenges, and proving that within us is the spirit of the gods and we are great and we can accomplish. And I feel like that's sort of a direct opposite of what I have learned and what I'm told Christianity is about, which is being prostrate, being subservient, and ultimately that this world doesn't matter at all. And that like it's this weird opposite pull that seems to inspire the people here that is directly counter to the spirit in me and the things that inspire me. And it's been something I've struggled with for years, and it's one of the reasons that I think I gravitated towards new atheism so long ago. And I don't know, it's just it's a weird thing I ponder about a lot. I just wanted to get your
Yeah.
thoughts on it before we wrapped up today. Just and of course we can do another stream specifically about this one day if you ever wanted to.
Sure. Well, I mean, you're going to have to beat Philo's Miscellany to that one, because he and I are probably going to do a stream point. Anyway, so let me put it this way. I think that the actually spiritually bifurcated, and I think that largely that is on the Christian versus pagan lines. Yes, much of mythology and much of like the popular stories that you continuously hear over and over again, like like the Arthurian legends or Beowulf, etc., and all these different like myths and things that keep popping up. Those keep popping up for a reason. Like they bubble get up again to the surface because they're speaking to something else, right? And I don't mean to like proselytize or anything. That's not my purpose or anything at all.
Okay.
But I just think that there is a spiritual bifurcation in our society, in our culture, and in our civilization that needs to be addressed. And I mean, there's insights that de Benoit has about the Christians, and I don't mean to throw shade or anything, because this isn't really the proper for that. But there's like this really weird attitude that they have towards that sort of older style. And I think that ultimately that comes from their taking on a lot of the attitudes of Yahweh themselves, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately where it comes from.
Okay.
That's an idea that I got from de Benoit. So if I was
I've never read
like
or listened to de Benoit books. Is he is he a dead author? It sounds French. Is he a French guy?
Yeah, he was a figure of the French New Right in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm not sure if he's still alive or not. But I read his book on being a pagan, and that provided the majority of my talking points for my paganism stream with AA. And typically, he gives a lot of the.
It was a good stream, by the way. I appreciated that one. That was a good one.
Yeah. Thank you. But the interesting thing about him, and what I still maintain this, right, because he does this in his book. He basically says, this is Christian or this is Abrahamic, and this is not, right? And it's very important to distinguish yourself along those lines. Because you have to understand what you are not before you can go forward into understanding what you are. So that's my take on him.
Okay. Well, I see somebody typing a whole lot to me in the chat. I can't exactly read all of that and respond to it, so I'm sorry. If you want to have a long conversation with me, you can do it in email. You can reach out to me one day, or you can just maybe, if you want to have a verbal conversation with me privately, we could talk on Telegram or Discord or something one day. But I can't read 5 or 6 comments and respond to it comfortably on stream. But I do appreciate your fervor there. And if you want to take all those messages that you typed in the chat and put it in a long form comment when the stream is over, I'll be glad to engage with you that way as well. But I can't do it on stream. Speaking of the stream itself, Mandrill, we're getting here towards the end, and now is the time in my Corner Club streams where I ask my guests if there are things that have come up during the stream, or maybe questions you might have had before you even came on the stream that you had for me. Are there anything that I brought up today you want to ask me about? Any questions or ideas of mine you want that you're curious about, you want to talk about here before the end?
Well, you're from Appalachia, right? So I perceive you are probably part of my cultural grouping in the United States, which is the Scots-Irish borderers. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Would you describe yourself as such?
Almost all of my family tree is Anglo and Celt, and predominantly on my father's side was Scottish, and my mother's side is from Ukraine, Moldova, and I think Ireland is where her people are from, and so that's the stock that I am from.
Yeah, it's interesting how these sorts of cliques form, and I kind of noticed this a little bit more because someone like Oros and Prudentialist and Paul and Charlemagne seem to hang out a lot. And I can't remember if Clossington is actually a Southerner or not. I think he's a Yankee. But it's interesting how these cultural cliques seem to form, and that's another possible.
I think
split point
Clossington
that
lives in New
I
York.
foresee happening.
I think. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what his cultural grouping is, but it's interesting, right? Because this is another sort of fault line that I can perceive that is going to occur in the future. I don't think it's an unbridgeable one, because there's a lot of similarities between the Cavaliers and the Borderers, in terms of like warrior ethos and honor culture and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But that's just one of those interesting things. So I don't, from my perspective, I don't know. There might be an ethnogenesis between those two things in America, and I think that that's possible, and I'm kind of excited for it, because it'd be very, very fascinating to see that in the future.
Yeah, the Saxon part of our genetics for the Anglo-Saxon cluster, if you look at, and I'm not just talking about the mid-century Germans, if you look at, the Germany between 1750 and 1950, there was this sort of non-religious mythical spirit to them. And when you look at sort of what happened in the UK and in France and in Ireland, it's sort of a religious Christian focus. And I wonder if America, being predominantly created from a mix of desperate and heroic genetic stock of those two clusters, I wonder if there is a genetic element to our spiritual split. Let's call it. What do you think about that? Do you think that that's true? Do you think that that's a felonious idea that should be thrown in the trash? Or what do you think?
Well, political beliefs are ultimately ideology, and there's a certain heritability, as we know, to political beliefs. I think there's like something like a 40% between parent and child or something, according to Jonathan Haidt in his book. So I mean, it's possible. It's definitely possible.
Demographics are destiny, as they say.
This is true.
So, anything else you want to ask me or pick my brain about while we're on stream together? Anything else come to mind?
Not at the moment. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That was the only real question I had for you.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. I enjoy talking to you. I like the kind of the back and forth that we have. I'd love to do another stream with you one day. Be glad to do a compilation with you and others if you want to do something on your stream, on your channel or someone else's. So please, in the future, keep me in mind for any projects that you want to work on with me, any streams you want to have on with me. And if you would ever like to be on for another one-on-one conversation here at the Corner Club, let me know and we'll definitely make that happen. Okay.
Sure. Oh, I did think of one question, actually. I'm
sure.
so sorry.
Go ahead.
What is your favorite battle mech?
Oh man, that's a hard one. I think that it would have to be the Warhammer, and then of course what it eventually became, which was the Timberwolf, or what the Inner Sphere called the Mad Cat. I think that the upper heavy or light assault weight category is where my warrior spirit lives. And aesthetically, I find the Warhammer probably the coolest mech that there is. And the clan expression of that is, I suppose, the Timberwolf. Or maybe the Thor. The Thor is close too. But I'm gonna final answer, Warhammer. Final answer, Warhammer.
Good. Awesome.
And I don't want to go down the autistic BattleTech rabbit hole, because we'd be on here for 3 more hours. So let's go ahead and move away from that now. But I had a wonderful chat with you. Like I said, everything I said still stands. I'm not going to repeat myself. But if anybody that's listening to this wants to get a hold of Raging Man, you can find his Twitter and his subscribe star in the description of the video below. I also have linked to his YouTube channel. He has not made a lot of videos yet, but I've listened to 2 of his, and they were both good. He is very active in the growing dissident community here in both America, and we're connected to many other countries as well. You can find him at all of those places, and hopefully you'll find him on my channel again one day. And thank you to all of you again who support my channel. And I ask of you, if you like my work and you want what I do to continue, please share the links to my streams and let people know that I make content not just on YouTube. I'm doing my best to make my Odyssey grow, to help my D-Life and my Entropy grow, because I need to grow into all of these other spheres. And the more that I can grow and the more people that I can network with, the better. And if there's any content creator or any writer, speaker, anybody of the dissident sphere that you want me to have a conversation with, reach out to me and let me know, and I'll do my best to have a convo with them as well. So thank you for being here today, Raging Mandrill. I look forward to our next conversation, and may all of our gods, whoever they are, bless us, and may all of our mythological figures inspire us to be the great men and women that they want us to be. So any closing thoughts you have or anything you'd like to say to the audience before we end the stream here?
Yes, actually. Well, first, thanks for having me on. And I do also have a Substack. Well, I don't know if you showed that for me or not, but yes, I do have that.
Certainly
so, cool. So, yeah.
Anything else?
That's it.
Alrighty. Well, I had a wonderful time with you. We will do it again soon. And remember, have this coming Monday night, Discordant Dragons, not on YouTube, only on Odyssey and Entropy, and of course D-Live, like always. But come see me Monday night for the best in D&D entertainment through it's sort of like Unpopular Opinions, if you're familiar with that, but it's with make-believe fantasy dragons as the topics, and they each have a particular news story or something going on in current events that they need to be explained or have a question about. It's a rip-roaring good time. I have on a lot of fun guests, and Mandrill's been on there before. So come over to Odyssey or Entropy on Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern, and check that out. Have a great weekend, everybody. Keep heart and fight